Good morning. My name is Irene López-Rodríguez, and I am Margarita Salas, postdoctoral researcher working at the University of Ottawa. My presentation is called Discussing Women's Sexuality and Reproductive Rights Through Animalistic and Mechanistic Images in Margaret Atwood Surfaces. So without further ado, let's get started. As you can see in the table of contents, first, I'm going to give you a summary of the novel for those who have not read it or who might not remember the story really well. Then I will move on to the issue of women's sexuality and reproductive rights in the novel, because issues of sex, contraception, pregnancy, labor, and abortion are going to be explored through the two main female characters, and we are going to see how the Canadian writer uses images of machines and animals to deal with these issues. Afterwards, I will touch upon some of the most common metaphors used in the Western world when dealing with the female body, because this is going to provide us a very important framework to analyze and understand the same images or similar images that Margaret Atwood is going to use when dealing with women's sexuality and reproductive rights. And finally, I will try to draw some conclusions regarding the intention when Margaret Atwood uses these images in her novel. So let's begin with a summary of the novel, okay? So disguised as a mystery novel about a woman's search of her missing botanist father on a remote island in northern Quebec, in the company of her partner Joe and a married couple formed by David and Anna, surfacing delves into key issues pertaining to women's sexuality and reproductive rights. Through the two female characters of Anna and the protagonist and main narrator, Margaret Atwood explores sexual relationships, contraception, pregnancy, labor, and abortion. On dealing with these topics, the Canadian writer resorts to images of machines and animals that are deeply rooted in Western culture's understanding of the female body. So, as I said before, women's issues are explored through the two main female characters, the unnamed narrator, who is also the protagonist, and Anna. So some biographical information in the book regarding these two characters. Well, the narrator has a former partner who was a married art teacher who forced her to have an abortion in an illegal clinic. As a result of this traumatic experience, the narrator is going to make up a story about her divorce and the loss of a child to cover up this abortion. At the moment, the narrator is in another relationship with Joe, who is another art teacher. However, we find out that their relationship is really superficial in the sense that it is based on a mechanistic view of sex because it really lacks a strong emotional connection or bond. In fact, the narrator is going to turn down Joe's marriage proposal. And as far as Anna is concerned, she's married to David, a domineering and male chauvinistic man. Anna is constantly objectified and sexualized since David asks her to be attractive for him at all times. David even forces Anna to be on the contraceptive pill, although she had already had some health issues as a result of being on the pill. And he even forces Anna to pose half naked in front of him and Joe for the documentary that both are filming. And also, I want to mention that David even punishes Anna with violent sexual intercourse, or, on the other hand, with no sex at all. So, to fully understand the treatment of the women's issues that I'm going to be dealing with in the next slides, it is also important to bear in mind the context of the novel. First, we have to consider Margaret Atwood as a feminist. And this is something that we can see in all her works, how she advocates for women's rights. And secondly, and extremely important, is that when the novel was published, abortion was still illegal in Canada. So in the Western world, the female body has frequently been the subject of metaphor. Most of the metaphors that have been used to describe women's anatomy have negative implications because they usually reinforce sexist beliefs about the role of women in society. So, for example, a common metaphor that we have in the Western world to describe the female body represents the female body as a bureaucratic organization. So within this approach, the reproductive organs are seen as being controlled and organized. And because of this, menstruation and menopause are presented negatively as failure and breakdown of central control. This metaphor presupposes that women's bodies need external monitoring and control. Another metaphor connects the female body with a factory or a machine. The female body is understood as a factory or machine that produces desirable goods, in other words, babies. Hence, menstruation is seen as the generation of waste products or debris, and menopause as the closure of the company or the breakage of the machine, whereas the infertile body as a defective machine. This metaphor obviously is detrimental for female self-esteem and body image, or rendering them as useless, particularly as they age or if they face fertility issues. Besides, within this mechanistic approach, we have the metaphor, the well-known metaphor of the biological clock, which basically equates the functioning of a clock to a woman's timeline for having children. This metaphor puts pressure on women to become mothers and may even affect fertility treatments, like the decision of many women to freeze their eggs. The female body can also be compared to a complex technological device that needs instructions. From this perspective, pregnancy and giving birth require the control of the woman and even the medicalization of labor, since technology is difficult and not intuitive. When dealing with miscarriage, this metaphor indirectly blames women for the loss of a baby, since women are seen as unable to operate their own bodies. Women's bodies are also identified with businesses whose value depends on the generation of children. In this sense, conception, fertility, and even surrogacy are seen as a profit, a benefit, and even as an investment. This capitalistic metaphor makes women with no children worthless. Another metaphor compares the women's reproductive system as an open space that can be accessed. Therefore, contraception takes the form of objects that block that entry, such as putting a fence, a wall, a gate, a barrier, or a lock. This metaphor makes women use more contraception methods, since sometimes they do not perceive the health risk associated to them. Finally, the female body can be seen as a clean space that an embryo or fetus makes dirty. This metaphor resonates in the discourse of abortion when getting rid of the baby, since getting rid of the baby is seen as cleaning, wiping, scrubbing, vacuuming, or even dusting. This dehumanization obviously makes the experience of termination of pregnancy way less traumatic. Surfacing, David sees Anna and the narrator as chicks. For example, Anna freaks out because she forgot to put on her makeup. God, she said, what am I going to do? I forgot my makeup. He'll kill me. He wants me to look like a young chick all the time. If I don't, he gets mad. Or when David makes a pass on the narrator, he says, you're a groovy chick. You know the score. You aren't married. Here we can see how David sexualizes both his wife and the narrator by calling them chicks. This metaphor, by the way, represents a domestic animal and it is connected with David's conception of women as housewives and as serving men. But within this zoomorphic scenario, we can also see that David understands having sex in just of feelings. For example, sometimes he tells his wife, lie down, Anna, I'm gonna use my own rod. And also, which is interesting, is that Anna is seen as an animal suffering that is trapped by David while they are having violent sex. Because as we said before, David sometimes punishes Anna with violent sexual intercourse. Then something different, not a word, but pure pain, clear as water. An animal, at the moment the trap closes, is like death, I thought. Obviously, with these animal images, Atwood criticizes the sexualization of women, and it is interesting because in the novel, real animals are commonly killed for pleasure and for sport. And in this sense, Margaret Atwood throws some parallelisms between the exploitation of animals and women in patriarchal societies. But also in the novel, we can see that contraception is represented to the woman as a machine metaphor. Anna and the narrator have a frank conversation regarding contraception, and both admit that they used to be on the pill, but decided to quit because the pill was having really bad side effects on their health. So, for example, Anna got a blood clot in her leg, whereas the narrator's vision got really blurry. Despite this health risk, David still wants Anna to be on the pill. The narrator then reflects on this contraceptive method, likening a woman to a chemical slot machine when she says, sex used to smell like rubber gloves and now it does again. No more handy green plastic packages, moon shape, so that the woman can pretend she's still natural, cyclical, instead of a chemical slot machine. This image of the body as a woman, as a chemical slot machine, is really interesting because apart from its dehumanizing effect, a woman's body is thought of as being operated by males. Besides, the fact that it is chemical has to do with the chemical substances that are used to compose the contraceptive pill. And what is really significant here is that it is also a slot machine. And therefore, we have the idea of gambling and of playing with women's health and women's bodies, because after all, within this metaphor, sex is seen as a game when a woman can lose if she gets pregnant, even though she may be on the pill. And with this image, Atwood seems to criticize that women do not have control over their own bodies, even when their health is at risk, because men put women's body at risk for their own gratification, for their own sexual pleasure. Within the mechanistic metaphor, Atwood also presents a pregnant narrator as an incubator that produces babies. The narrator imagines how it was her husband who wanted her to be pregnant and how he controlled every single aspect of her pregnancy, feeding her, measuring her, taking care of her. Then, once again, once the baby was born, the narrator becomes a useless machine, as we can read here. But I couldn't have brought the child here. I never identified it as mine. I didn't name it before it was born even, the way you are supposed to. It was my husband's. He imposed it on me all the time it was growing in me. I felt like an incubator. He measured everything he would let me eat. He was feeding it on me. He wanted a replica of himself. After he was born, I was no more use. So again, here we have the image of the woman, of the body of the woman as a useless machine once the body produced the desired baby. But also in the novel, we see that the female body is represented as a machine and as an animal when dealing with giving birth. The narrator's body turns into a machine taken to a hospital where she's connected with tubes, and here healthcare professionals become technicians and mechanics, and the baby is taken up with forceps. Notice here that Margaret Atwood is really funny, and she describes forceps as though it were a fork. The narrator obviously paints a dehumanized picture of the natural process of giving birth. But apart from technological devices, there are machines, metal frameworks suggesting against the coldness of the experience because of the material, and even knives. In like manner, the narrator's body is viewed as a dead animal when giving birth. In this case, doctors become butchers. This bloody image is even more poignant than the technological one. As opposed to these images, however, the narrator imagines giving birth as a mother cat licking the baby. The baby will slip out easily as an egg, a kitten, and I lick it off and bite the cord, the blood returning to the ground where it belongs. Without any doubt, the most controversial issue in the novel has to do with abortion. The termination of a pregnancy is represented through animal metaphors. Abortion is seen as the hunting of an animal. The narrator's body is transformed into a barrow, perhaps because women's genitalia are commonly associated with furry animals, particularly bunnies. Besides, the idea of killing an animal is stressed with the term slaughter. Along with this homomorphic metaphor, the image of the narrator's body as a defective machine appears here, because we can read that when she has an abortion, when she gets pregnant, her partner at the time, that is the married art teacher, feels that she has a problem and that the narrator's body needs fixing. As we can see here, he said I should do it. He made me do it. He talked about it as though it was legal, simple, like getting a wart removed. He said it wasn't a person, only an animal. I should have seen that was no different. It was hiding in me as if in a barrel, and instead of granting it sanctuary, I let them catch it. I could have said no, but I didn't. That made me one of them too, a killer. After the slaughter, the murder, he couldn't believe I didn't want to see him anymore. It bewildered him. He resented me for it. He expected gratitude because he arranged it for me. He fixed me, so I was as good as new. Others, he said, couldn't have better. Since then, I carried that bed around inside me layering it over a cyst, a tumor, a black pearl. So in conclusion, we can say that Atwood employs images of mushrooms and animals when dealing with women's sexuality, contraception, pregnancy, giving birth, and abortion. These metaphors that associate the female body with mushrooms and animals are deeply rooted in the Western world and have been studied to have negative consequences in a way not only women, but society in general understands women's body and women's role in society. Atwood criticizes the exploitation of women's bodies in patriarchal societies through these metaphors. Surfacing, let me tell you, is relevant today because of current debates on abortion and procreation that have re-emerged all over the world, particularly in the States, with the overturning of Roe v. Wade in 2022, as you know, the historic Supreme Court decision that has guaranteed the right to abortion in the US for nearly 50 years, and which is now over. So thank you very much for your attention.